Hello, welcome to today's episode of the 12 Myths of Christmas. I'm Brian Vermeer, and today we're going to be looking at a question that is very divisive among denominations, especially between Roman Catholics and Protestants. And that is the issue of, was Jesus an only child? That is, did Mary have any children after she had Jesus? Now, for Catholics and some other Orthodox groups, this is a very important issue. They stress that Mary remained a virgin for her entire life. And this teaching goes back to about the 2nd century with a book called the Proto-Evangelion, which was never considered scripture. I need to emphasize that this teaching does not come from the Bible. There is no place in the Bible that specifically says Mary remained a virgin her whole life. But it was taught because around that time, the belief came about that sex was a symptom of original sin. And since they believe that Mary was conceived without original sin, that is, God bestowed grace upon her at the moment of conception. This is what they call the Immaculate Conception. And yes, that's right, the Immaculate Conception refers to the conception of Mary, not to the conception of Jesus. Because of that, they believe, that Mary had to remain pure her whole life and never had any, taint of original sin. This was also supported by St. Thomas Aquinas, who said that it was only fitting that Mary should remain a virgin her whole life because since Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, he should also be the only begotten Son of Mary. The only problem with this belief, though, is that in the Bible, in the Gospels, in the book of Acts, in the letters of Paul and others, it specifically says that Jesus had brothers. For example, in Matthew 13, verses 55 and 56, the people of Nazareth, after hearing Jesus preach, are wondering, where in the world Jesus got this education because they knew him growing up. And they say in verses 55 and 56, "Isn't his mother called Mary? And his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And his sisters, aren't they all with us?" So here we have them specifically naming 4 brothers of Jesus. And they use the plural word sisters, which implies that Jesus had at least 2 sisters. Now, the word that they use there is the word adelphoi, brothers, and adelphoi, sisters. You may have heard this word adelphoi, meaning brothers, in the name of the city of Philadelphia, which is called the city of brotherly love. So, it says specifically there that Jesus had brothers and sisters. Well, how do you get around that? And this is why most Protestants believe that Jesus was not an only child. Another verse is in Matthew where it says when Joseph married Mary, that he did not have relations with her until she gave birth to her firstborn, which implies that they did have normal relations afterwards, as any Jewish husband and wife were expected to do. They were expected to have kids. So, how do you get around that? Well, one way they get around that is they say that this word adelphoi, brothers, can also mean close relatives like cousins. The problem I have with that, though, is that there is a word that means close relative and cousins. This word is used in Luke 1:36, where the angel tells Mary Consider your relative Elizabeth, or in some translations, consider your cousin Elizabeth. And the word there used is sungenis, which means specifically in this case a female relative, a close relative. So there is a word, and that's not the word that Matthew used. Matthew specifically used the word for brothers. Now, this word adelphoi for brothers is used other places in the New Testament where it does not mean literal brothers, but in most of those cases, what it means is members of the church. That is, Paul writes to the brothers in the church of, Corinth or whatever, and he uses that same word. So it's the same way that one church member would address another one as a brother. So it's never used to mean a cousin or other close relative. It just means either literal brother or spiritual brother. The other way that they can get around this verse about Jesus having brothers is the belief that when Joseph and Mary were married, that Joseph was already an older man who had already been widowed and already had children by another woman, by his first wife, and that Mary would have been his second wife. And that way they say these brothers and sisters mentioned are his children by his first wife, and therefore they're actually Jesus's stepbrothers and sisters. Well, again, there is nothing in Scripture that backs that up. The only place where that's found is, again, in this book, the Proto-Evangelion, which was not written until at least 100 years after the birth of Jesus. So, I'm going to leave it to you to decide what you believe about this. Do you believe that Jesus was an only child of Mary and that Mary remained a virgin her entire life? Or do you believe that, Mary and Joseph, after Jesus was born, had normal marital relations and had other children, at least 4 other boys and 2 other girls? I tend to believe the latter. I believe Jesus did have brothers and sisters, and I don't see any problem with that. I don't see any reason why Mary needs to remain a virgin her whole life to be a special person. So, thanks for listening. Tomorrow, I'm planning on doing one which may shock quite a few of you. So, watch tomorrow. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do that, and I'll see you again later.